This week we are going on a little bit of a hiatus in our exploration of Hilchei Shabbos. As everyone found out last night, we still have a lot of open questions in Hilchos Kosher and Mater, both in Londis and Lachol Lamaisa. We'll have to nachzor v'nishn sugizu, and we're going to go see if we can start preparing again in Kriyas Torah. There'll be two shiurim a day for the whole week. So now I've gotten a lot of questions of what's going to be in the morning, what's going to be in the afternoon. The answer is I'm not sure. Depends on which island comes on and which. I don't know exactly who's on here. I only know who's on if you identify yourself by name, which is only about a third of you. So I don't know who's going to be on in the morning, who's going to be on the evening. There will be overlap in the sense that I'll try to chazer and try to make sure that everybody gets the basics. And the shir stands on its own if you're here. And if you come in there, it certainly will be helpful. The sugyas that I would like to preview this week include the following. The basic makayr of Kriyas Torah, machayev of Kriyas Torah, and as we'll hear soon, the numerous categories of Kriyas Torah. That's sugya number one. We'll discuss it today and tonight at 8 p.m. All the shiurim, the evening shiurim this week are at the same time to avoid confusion. Not sure that'll avoid confusion, but it'll certainly help. At 8 p.m., I was totally unaware of this as a milsa b'dichsa, but somebody came over to me yesterday and he said, "Are you doing this on purpose?" I said, "What am I doing on purpose?" Tomorrow night and Sunday night, you're scheduling a shir in the middle of Einif and the Choshev, quote unquote, Heilige moments in the American society in the middle of a Choshev football game. I said I was totally unaware of that because it's not in my frame of reference. But if that's true, then everybody who comes on gets double and triple schar for being bayit and the narishkeit and the havleil b'zeh. We made a scene yesterday and my famous here. And if there's any a case of Yarchei Kranais, a concept which we're going to hear about when it comes to Kriyas Torah, this mass delusional whatever, which has crept into our society, unfortunately, in a big way, it's certainly right to make a statement that we'll learn Torah under any circumstances. And any request to calibrate it during quote unquote halftime, Nunu. Rabbi Shalom gave us a Torah to learn, and there was no such a thing as halftime. Okay, so the Yisaides that we're going to learn is the Makayr, Chayev, various categories of Kriyas Torah, where the what's the right word? Where the Chayev, where the I figure out a way to get the lighting as good as possible. Where the Makayr for all these various types of Kriyas Torah comes from. Second, we're going to go into the core analysis of whether Kriyas Torah is a chayvas yochid, a chayvas tzibor. A lot of raid about this. In the Lamdasha raid and the Achrayim, all the way down to the sugyas that we have. I don't know. No, Dr. Letterreich, you have to follow my lead here. So don't put it on yet till I finish the Agdama. Thank you. I'll listen to the short Agdama. The second parsha that we're going to be looking at, and then we're going to be using tomorrow a different set of marmakaimis. I'm just telling my partners here, but for those of you who are on here are not regulars, the entire operation here is only possible because of the Herculean efforts of Hagoyin Ramad Shapiro and the incredibly dedicated beyond words Dr. Pesach Letterreich, who take care of all the details. You hear me on these things, but I'm only a tool that is used to explicate their hard work. So they take care of all the screen sharing, which obviously is very important because without seeing the Makairis, you won't have the same clarity. Okay, so I must want to go through the topics that we'll try and cover this week. So the second major topic is Kriyas Torah Chayvas Tzibur or Chayvas Yachid, both lamdish implications and halachic implications. How much are you required to do, and how could you be yaitza if in fact there is possibilities of no Kriyas Torah. We went through this Rabbi Sai, unfortunately, painfully, great length during the Idon of Corona. I can tell you how much Klal Yisrael was mitametz to be mekayim the mitzvahs. A lot of a struggle. I'm not going to go now into the whole contentious history of how we rose to the challenge. But the bottom line is that Klal Yisrael did the best they could to paskin that it was a chayvas yachid, even though there were times when it certainly wasn't possible. This brings up the allied question of tashlumim. The Simcha Shulchan Aruch that last year was largely not learned because, like everything else, there are Siman Shulchan Aruch which are generally theoretical and not so negela ma'isa. And one of them was Tashlum im ilchais until Kriyas Torah. Whoever misses Kriyas Torah, which tzibur ever misses Kriyas Torah, as somebody said correctly, probably correctly so, since the Holocaust, these shilas did not exist because where was there a gezerah against Kriyas Torah, which affected all of Klal Yisrael? The Rebbein Shalom sent us this challenge, and for many months, many months, there were times when we couldn't have Kriyas Torah. There is a vast literature which existed to a certain degree in Kuflam Hey, but was rarely touched upon. Well, Tashlumim in Kriyas Torah, how you make up these things. This is complicated. I really could spend an entire week on this, which in fact, many Rabbanim, some of my colleagues as Megiddo Shiur did. I have a whole now a file of Shiurim and Tashlumim and Kriyas Torah. We could spend a whole week on this. I don't know how much time we'll have for it, but it's a very important question, and we'll try to go into it as much as we can. Third question, which is allied to this, is Kriyas Torah a chiyuv of Kriya or a chiyuv of Shmiya? Everybody understands the difference between the definition of the words. One is that there is a requirement that it be nikra. Of course, if it's be nikra, and as we'll learn, to Davar Shabbat requires 10 people, a Pale Yaitsev, this is you're hearing it, or no, or is the lumdis that you actually have to hear it, and the Kriya is only a Tanai to create the Shmiya. My nafkamina, numerous nafkaminas, you all already know that this is a similar Hakir in Hilchais Megillah, and this question has to be understood to understand many of the questions of how we are Yaitse Kriyas Torah, how we Yaitse Shmei Kaina, how we Yaitse Midin Shmiya without Shmei Kaina. This leads to another question about the brachos in Kriyas Torah. There's brachas Torah bechlal that we make in the morning, and there's the brachas Torah on the Torah. The question is, why do we need that? We already made brachas Torah in the morning. What's the mechayev for the brachos? A big, complicated question with a lot of marmakaimis in the Rishonim, in the Rush, and various other places, which needs to be understood. Then, going back to the first introduction of the various types of Kriyas Torah, there is a lot of halachic discussion of the differences of Kriyas Torah in tiny eyes, the Kriyas Torah, which we've touched upon. Chanukah time is a little bit of a foreshadowing of the Kriyas Torah of those, the Rabbanon, Dikiyamim, Taivim, such as Chanukah Purim. Where does that come from? Obviously can't come from the same mechayev as those Kriyas Torahs, which may or may not be Daraisa, or at least been enacted during the Daraisa period. Since these are later to Kanas Rabbanon, Mechatesa, there should be a chiyuv of Kriyas Torah and Chanukah on Purim. And I'll go through the list now of the possible types of Kriyas Torah. So where does it all come from? And Tainus has its own literature. Those are the wish lists for the topics that we would like to at least cover this week. Somehow, experiences that we won't get to all of it, but at least we'll try to do our best. Okay. So what are the categories of Kriyas Torah as we have them and as we understand them, as we know them? First of all, for planning purposes, there will be a shiur of Rosh Hashanah today. Rosh Hashanah is currently somewhere, I believe it's in Europe, having left today and was not able to do a live shiur, but he left us a tape on an allied subject on the Yonim of Talmud Torah, which the Olam will be able to enjoy. Couldn't be mechayiv him on the airplane to say a live shiur, but This is the Tashlumim that we can do, and he'll come on more or less about the same time that he normally comes on every week, and as always will be the same time with Tainug Ruchani. He will be traveling through the course of next Sunday. That created a little bit of a challenge for us, but in order to underscore his ahava for us, in particular for those who are regulars every day on our, I don't like to call it the Zoom Kallah, but our every day in our day Kallah, which happens to take place in Zoom, he agreed to cut short a trip to America. He's coming to America to be the lead speaker at a medical conference. He is one of the Mari de Shmeitzes, along with Don Yitzchak Rubinstein, the two senior medical poskim now in Eretz Yisrael. He's coming here for some sort of a halachic medical conference, which is an important event in the yearly cycle of Unzer Reifim, such as Dr. Letterreich or Talmidei Chachamim, and need halachic guidance. But he agreed to come back. He was going to stay the whole week, but agreed to come back to Eretz Yisrael just to be able to talk to the Yarchei, Yarchei Kallah, because, as he's pointed out to us so often, he has been with us since the beginning. So that's the segue into the participation of Agoyin Bal Minchas Asher. He will be coming on about after 12. Let's see if I can get this Kristera background going. So how many categories do we have of Krista Torah? So let's go through the obvious list. Every Shabbos, where does that come from? Yantif, where does that come from? May or may not come from the same Makar. Beis V'Hei, same question. Shabbos and Mincha, it's number 4. Where does that come from? Number 5 is Kriyas Torah of Tiny Ice that we mentioned. Number 6 is Kriyas Torah that we said of the Rabbanan Dika Yom Tovim. Number 7 is Kriyas Torah of, I guess it's allied to 5, Kriyas Torah of Tinius, which may not be full-fledged Tinus Sibur, but which may be a Tinus because of Bahab or because of a Tinus Yachid. What sort of Kriyas Torah is there? And finally, there's an interesting Kriyas Torah which takes place, which may be a Da'iraisa. And there's not one of them, but there are, in fact, 2 of them. Middle of the year, I'll call you back. There are 2 of them. One is, of course, Parshas Zachar. Yachal B'Peh. Talmud Leimar says it's free that Yachal B'Leiv, Talmud Leimar B'Peh. The Chazal took this B'Peh to mean Kriyas Torah. And there's also Parshas Para, which is a machlekes, whether it is Da'iraisa. So there you go, 7, 8 categories. And I've left 1 and 2 out, which we will get to presently. There are Kriyas Torahs of Minhagim, Kriyas Torah of Minhagim, which is the Simchas Torah, both the Kriya of the day of Simchas Torah and the night of Simchas Torah are departures from the normal schedule. You want to put that into a category, you can. And then somebody pointed out to me, correctly so, based yesterday during the somebody pointed out to me, you missed 2 more Kriyas Torah, so give you that category. Yeah, which is that? Anybody know what I'm referring to when I say Chagigah Daf Gimel? Anybody learn Daf Yomi? By the way, everybody say I don't know if Rav Marchad Tzaddik has opened up all your mics, but this is designed to be an interactive share for those of you who are coming on here just new, so you can answer. Anybody know what I'm referring to, a kriya, when I say Chagigah Daf Gimel? Anybody have an idea? Anybody learned Daf yesterday? Everybody say, what state? The Daf is
Hakel.
Exactly. My friend Rav Morris, the West Siders always comes through. The Hakel, the Kriya of the Malach during Hakel. That's a chelik of a mitzvah d'oraisa, which will be nizkar this year because Lamoid Shnasa Shmita. There's another one similar to that. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Another Kriya.
Yes, Kohen Gadol.
Excellent, Rabbi Parkov. You look at this. Look at our ability to unite Kallah Yisrael. I have Morris on the east side of Manhattan, and Abelezer on the west side of Yerushalayim, both answering the same question. Beautiful. So the Kriya the Kohen Gadol in the Beis Hamikdash after the Avodah, what's the site of that Kriya? Simtim Tzleimer, that's another category. Okay, let's start with the.
What about Hoshana Rabbah?
Again?
Leil Hoshana Rabbah.
So I was super glad to put that on the list. Yes, that is a minig, and so far the list was only those things that everybody does. Not everybody participates in Leil Hoshana Rabbah. It's a minig which goes all the way back early, all the way back to the same time of the Omatakein Tikkun Leil Shavuos, the Omatakein Mishnah Torah. There are various reasons for this takana, maybe to be Muslim. Shemais. By the way, I guess you can even throw in Shnai Mikveh Echad Targum, because there are questions whether you can be Yitzhak Shnai Mikveh Echad Targum along with Kriyas Torah. But that's a subcategory which I don't know if it's going to make the list. Okay.
My
Modais is, well, I included that in Bahab, but that's correct. Excellent. Sorry, who else?
The Nisim before Pesach.
I blew that one. 100%. I missed it. The Nisim before Pesach, the Torah is taken out and that Kriya is made. You need good salad. You absolutely need a tzibur. I've been in shuls where they walked out and there was no minion. The Nisim before Pesach is a important category. We'll put that into the category of Kriyas Torah Al Pi Minig. Anybody else? Anything else that I overlooked?
Kriyas HaNesiim.
That was just said. But I'm happy that somebody else brought it up. So now we know for a fact I have two Adam on that category. Okay, whoever is keeping track here, I'm not sure who's writing this down, but whoever it is, Ashrecha, Yashakayach. And anybody else who wishes to answer any questions that I have. I see now no one is participating. So now you shouldn't have done that, because now I know that I have the ability to raise my unanswerable Socratic questions, because I know the Ilm is able to answer. Okay, let's go to the first pages. We're being helped here by various, we have a 500-page book, currently in formation. I don't know, 500 pages of exaggeration. I'm trying to cut it down. We have a very large book of the Marmar Kaimis, but today and tomorrow, being this Azar, being helped a little bit with the Marmar Kaimis. These are all standard Marmar Kaimis, but it's helpful to have them all grouped together on the by my friends in Lakewood, the Shifty group, and I want to thank them for helping us by grouping these Marmar Kaimis together, so my friends did not have to actually knit them. They are together in the, as I said, in our master book, but the master book is construction now, so we're going to do it this way. So there's a Gemara in Baba Kama.
When you move your head back and forth,
I know. I just saw. Don't worry. Don't relax, please.
You lose your microphone. We don't hear you.
I understand that. I moved it temporarily just to get papers. It's not a market, so don't have to worry about that. Okay. So let's start here with the first Sugya the Gemara. So what's it doing in Baba Kama? The Gemara is talking about Takanas Ezra, many of them which have to do with Nezikim de Takanas. And one of them says, the Gemara says, Ezra, sorry, Takanatik, Ezra Shekayim b'mincha b'Shabbos, Kayim b'Shenim b'Chamishi. So all of a sudden we skipped category 1 and 2, we went straight to category 3 and category 4, which were Takanas of Ezra. What's the reason for these takanas? Let's skip down. The Gemara now goes through the rest of the takanas until the 2 dots. Yishi Kairin Sheni v'Chamishi Asmar Kasha Ezra Tikain. Well, Mikar Avim Betakna. How can you say this is the takana of Ezra? It's a much earlier. Right after the yellow, the second yellow. How can you say it's a takana of Ezra? It's a much earlier takana. Why is that? Because we know a following brisa. It's not the Klal Yisrael wandered around for 3 days. And they created the first of many merivos against Moshe Rabbeinu. Where's our water? Says the Gemara, Darar Sheir Shumais. The Darshei Rishumais. Rashi explains Darshei Rishumais. Darshei are the Mikra'os. People, Tanai, who are Dairesh, Psukim. Amru, it's Rashum because of Teresh B'Ksav. Ein Mayim El Taira. Amar Ekal Samel Cholamayim. Given Shlocho Shlesh Yom B'Lei Taira Nilu. They got lost. They got spiritually lost. They had no anchor. Where did they have Taira before? And all of a sudden, the loss of Taira in the Midbar, 3 days before the real creation of Mount Taira. Where did they have this before? That all of a sudden they should be Nilu, and they should be able to just lose everything that they possibly had. So this is a good kasha. They did have, obviously, certain mitzvahs before. In Mitzrayim, they didn't have Torah, of course, as Torah. We know from the Lashon the Rambam talks about how Amram was metakein certain takanais. They had the nihugim of the avos. Avos were shomer kol Torah kula all the way down to Erev Tefshilin. They didn't do that medinei Torah because they didn't have it yet, but they had Messiahs. And they had various Messiahs, both on the Pakad Yifkad of the Gula, but they also had various Messiahs. They knew that there was Shabbos. So they were Shomer Shabbos to whatever extent they could. Whether or not there was Shomer Lam Tes Malachais is not clear, but there were Nihugim, and therefore they had something called Torah. Then in Mara, Kodesh Baruch Hu gave them mitzvahs in Mara. One of the mitzvahs that was told in Mara was the main two mitzvahs, two fascinating mitzvahs that were given in Mara. Baisa, which ones?
Shabbos Kibbut Avein.
Shabbos, Kibbut Avein, you missed one?
Paraduma.
Paraduma. So Rabbi say, believe me, as we now know from having learned Shabbos for almost 2 years, 2 years now, maybe more. If you learn Shabbos, you can learn Shabbos in 20 years. And believe me, there's no more difficult limud in Seder Taras than Paraduma. So I had plenty of Torah to learn. And when they didn't have that Torah, because it was a lacuna in the transmission of the Torah for those 3 days, Klal Yisrael started falling apart. What an incredible musavart. And the Gemara says, Amdu Nevi'im Shebeneim B'tiknu Shukayrim B'Shabbos. And the Gemara then goes on and gives our structure of Kriyas Torah. Sik Mech B'Shabbos, Kayrim B'Sheni, Sik Shlish Revi, Kayrim B'Chamishi, Sik Erev Shabbos, Kadesh Lo Yolinu Gimel Yom B'Lei Torah. This is the Brisa. Brisa in itself raises some important questions, which we'll get to in a moment. But the Gemara asks this Brisa as a kasha. So you see that there was a takana of Beis and Hay much earlier. Much earlier. The Gemara answers, you're right. Mikara, the original takana, whoever these Nevi'im, unsourced, unnamed Nevi'im are, Tiknu Chad Gavra Tilsei Psuki. Inami Tilse Gavra Tilse Psuke Connect God Levim Israel. Also who came along Moshe Rabbeinu. He came Tilse Gavra, came along Ezra, a Sefer, Tilse Gavra Vasara Psuke. He changed the takana a bit. 3 people, 1 person is not sufficient. We need 3 people, Keneged, Kahana Levim Israel, or Keneged 10 psukim, Keneged Asara Batlanim. As I mentioned, we did a little of this on the last 2 Monday night Shiurim. What does Keneged mean? We have Keneged Chazal whenever they had a Kabbalah that certain things had to be done. And Ezra was the predecessor to Chazal as the first, I guess, the first, let's get the right word, initiator, enabler of Torah Shemal Peh. Ezra was at the beginning of Bayesheni when Torah Shemal Peh became a companion, official companion to Torah Shemal Ksav. In the Kufa of Bayis Rishon, it of course existed for all the Batei Din that we had. Those learning Daf Shavua know that this was discussed this week's. And the Bezdin of Shaul had a Bezdin, of course, Shmuel had a Bezdin. So they had Batei Dinim that transmitted halachos, such as a Ma'anim Le'amaynis, which was the Bezdin of Bayaz. But Torah Shemal Peh, as a Hanhaga for all of Klal Yisrael, had not yet been promulgated. The reason, of course, is because it was Shabbat Peh, even though even in time of Ezra, of course, we were many, many hundreds of years before Rebbe, when it was the Eis Las Hashem being written down, allowed it to become the Torah Shabbat Peh. We understand it, but the Yesaidos of Torah Shabbat Peh were laid down by Ezra, and one of the Kabbalahs that he had was that there has to be a Kriya, and therefore the Keneged are not Mechayvim. The Keneged is similar to what we learned in Luchos Tefillah, that the Avos who Akein Keneged. That means they had a Kabbalah, this is how we have to do, and then Chazal looked for sources in the Torah to give this a spanka, to give it a chasima. This is the way they had to do it. Adkan Divrei Gemara. So there are three questions raised by this Gemara. First of all, what survives in our nihug of Beis and Hay? I'll leave it to Maskana of the Gemara. And second, what does the Gemara mean when it said Amnu Neviim Shabbaneim Betiknu? Who are these Neviim? Taisvis, and the second question, as to why Beis V'Hei, there's a question here. Why does it have to be Beis V'Hei? I didn't explicate Beis V'Hei as a limun f'neasim, but it should be, because there's a whole large literature on Beis V'Hei in addition to Mincha and Shabbos. So maybe if we have time, we'll devote a shir just to that. But Taisa asked the kasha, why Beis V'Hei? Now, what's the side of Taisa's kasha? Same Taisa's kasha is. Anybody know what the kasha is? What's the kasha based on? Why Beis V'Hei? What's the kasha based on? I'm putting myself on. Stop for a second.
When he went up
Well,
and when
he
came down.
After what?
When he went up and when he came down.
No. That's the teretz. What's Taisa's kasha? I'm not asking you.
Oh, you can have other configurations without being Beis and Hay, without going 3 days.
Okay. Sorry, my light. Right here. Okay. So, Shlomo Yosef, as always, is correct. Taisa's kasha is based on, if it's Gimel Yomim, why does it have to be the way it's structured? Could it be increased on Tuesday and Thursday, and you would have not have gone Gimel Yomim? Why point this way? Says Taisvis, and this is one of the more famous Taisvis in Shas. So Beis and Hay has a ruchnistic construct in Klal Yisrael. The Sratzalei HaMakayim, that created the day that we know as Yom Kippur. Well, if you say Eis Ratzin Baisa Aliyah, went up on Thursday, and the first Yom Kippur in history was on Monday. Kavu b'Sheni v'Chamishi. And then Taisa says, L'kach Noga now Lasanis Beis V'Hei. All of a sudden, we have a Makar for Bahab. And then the rest of the Taisus is dedicated to the question of the scheduling. When Moshe Rabbeinu came and Moshe Rabbeinu left, which is not for us now, because it's a complicated diyun in the Seder Olam. What is a question for us is, who, in fact, are these mysterious Nevi'im that were attacking this? As far as we know, we only know, maybe you want to throw an Eldad and Medad, but as far as you know, there's only one Navi in the Tkufa of Klal Yisrael. So who are these Nevi'im? So Rabbeinu or Rambam, let's shrink this and go to skip 2 pages, skip 1 page and go to the next page, to the Rambam. Come back to this Teres Chaim later. Moshe Rabbeinu, Tikein, Shiyukayr B'Torah, B'Ram, B'Shabbos, B'Sheni, B'Chamishi, B'Shavchris. The Amdu B'Niyim Shabbaneim is none other than Moshe Rabbeinu, which of course makes a lot of sense. By the way, if I should have, I have you written down here, I left that on my remark. The Mekevus Mishnah has we discussed them last week in our daily share. You're going to hear a lot of advertisements for the daily share because I know there are a lot of people who are here just to prepare the Kallah. But please, if you can do this, even one day a week, 2 day a week, 3 weeks, where we'd love to be able to expand the reach of our very chashuv a thing that we do every day. It's chashuv because of the quality of the senior Magid Yeshir come on. We have it structured, Marmakaimis, and Chanashir. So it's something which those of you who have time to learn at home or otherwise able to devote a couple hours a day to learning. The system is designed to create some Torah B'iyun. Why do I bring this up? Because the Mekevus Mishnah says, what happened in those 3 days? Fasting Mekevus Mishnah. He says, what happened was that they were Isaac and Torah because they already had whatever tzivui they had. So why did I stop being Isaac and Torah those 3 days? So he says, unbelievable part. He said they learned, I have to phrase this politically correctly, and I can only do this because I'm a Magid of the Daf Yomi now for almost 40 years. They were learning Daf Yomi, they weren't learning Be'iyun. It's not my lumdus. This is what he says. He says, they were only learning Lamigras, L'lei Be'iyun. And without Talmud Torah Be'iyun, look it up, from Mekevus Mishnah and Mechilta and Parshas Mishalach. Not to easy to say for define, but it's there. He says, Klal Yisrael is lost, is nilu, unless you learn Torah B'iyun. They had a shear, Lamigras. Lamigras is to be Gaires, but they weren't learning B'iyun. And without Iyun, there is nilu, and that's the aside for Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu what verstanden better than anybody else in history that the bandwidth. Okay, I'm using the same place I normally am. If the bandwidth is a problem, I can move. You'll let me know if this is a serious problem. Moshe Rabbeinu knew better than anybody else that in order for Klal Yisrael to survive until Mashiach comes, we're going to need Torah in its most serious form. So Moshe Rabbeinu's takana of Kriyas Torah was not lemigras, and then we'll get to this when we talk about the concept of Shmiya and Kriya. But it wasn't just to listen with half an ear. You know, that's a phrase which has become popular. I'm listening with half an ear. Kriyas Torah was the platform by which Torah would spread out to Klal Yisrael so they could learn Be'iyun. Now, obviously, until Ezra and until the Tkufa of Baal Peh came, it was a different form of learning, but they already had Leisignaiv means the kind of nefashah that customer daven. They already had the traditions of the limudim. They didn't have it explicated exactly through the Tanaim in the precise way that we are zeichet to have it now, but they had it. So, Shlomo Schwartz once in a Yom Tov Rabbanan. Didn't I say that? Did I miss that? Didn't I say Chanukah and Purim? I'm sure I did.
You did say it. It just wasn't put on the list. That's my only comment.
Oh. All right. Well, whoever's in charge of the list, get cracking there, okay? We need to have accuracy in our thing. Okay, but kids are back to this. So who are the Nevi'im? So the Rambam tells you who the Nevi is, Moshe Rabbeinu. And interesting enough, what does the Rambam say in the second line? Move back the red marker, the 2 words. What's his Shmiya Torah? The Rambam seems to undercut everything I just told you from the Mekevus Mishnah. Rambam seems to indicate that the side of Kriyas Torah is a din Shmiya. What's Shmiya Torah? Remains to be understood. Then the Rambam says Ezra was metakein other things because of Yesh Kronos, whatever Yesh Kronos means. Gamhu Ezra Tikkuchay Karma Chamish Fleish Me'adar or whether it's Psukim, and the Rambam gives you the maskana of the Gemara. Kipshuta says the Kesef Mishnah. Where did the Rambam get Moshe Rabbeinu Tikei? The Gemara says Nevi'im Shebeneim, and if it says Nevi'im Shebeneim, why should there be a obvious that kind of was Moshe Rabbeinu? Now, going back to a little bit here of I don't want to spend too much time on this because we don't have a lot, but I can't let this go without I can't let this go without at least discussing it. Yes, my friend Bumi tells me that I'm a little too close to the camera. Yes, it happens because the problem is I want to be able to learn with the Ilam, my Makaimus in the screen, so I have sometimes get too close. I do have them printed out, so I'll try to be mindful of that. So both the Marsha and even Kadmoyhem, the Rishonim discuss that Moshe Rabbeinu's Takana was necessary because listen to this: if you go 3 days without Torah, that's a chazaka. We find in the Torah 3 times is a chazaka. So 3 days without Torah is nischazek lahem bitul Torah. How do we know that? And there's a pasuk in the Tazveni Yom Yomayim Ezvecha. So now we have 3 days without serious Torah. Creates a chazaka, says the Marsha, of bitul Torah. In order to overcome that, Moshe Rabbeinu had to make a takana l'doros that this will never happen to allow a concept of bitul Torah to take hold in Klal Yisrael. And adds the Teres Chaim. We're going to get to the Teres Chaim in a moment. That since the Yetzer of a person is mischadesh on him every day, levakesh lahamisai, and the only antidote, the only vaccine which works 100% against that Yetzer Hara is sake. But Torah, you let it go 3 days, you are in trouble because you're allowing the bacteria, the virus, to the system, and you're not using the vaccine of Torah. And then once it's in there, says the Teres Chaim, and he has a long, beautiful drasha, you're in trouble. It's very difficult to get it out. If you look back in the Rishonim, the Rabbeinu Yonason says that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was particularly worried about this is because in addition to Torah protecting us spiritually, it also protects us physically. Moshe Rabbeinu, and of his many, many hats that he had, was also the chief general of Klal Yisrael, as you know. And we had to fight with Amalek. Who was in charge of it? Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, he subcontracted or he appointed a field commander, but it was his responsibility. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that one of the matanis that the Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us is the Torah is shaylet, is kadesh yishel to avenu. The Torah protects us. And what happened in the Midbar? We went Gimel Yamim, and that led Bitul Torah led to Kfir and Ikra Das Yesh Hashem Rekibeinim Ayim. What's the next pasuk, Rabbi say? What's the next pasuk after Hayesh Hashem Rekibeinim? Look into the Hishtal Shalois, says the Rishonim. Bitul Torah, Kfir and Ikra Das Yesh Hashem Rekibeinim Ayim. If you're a Talmud Chacham learn Torah, that question could not arise. You know the Rebbe Hashem is going to take care of you somehow. And what's the next pasuk after the word Imayim? Everybody knows this? No? Somebody answer me, please. No Balakri on this list here? Vayavay Amalek. Excellent, Shlomo. Pleasure to see my old friend. Vayavay Amalek. And Vayavay Amalek is both a spiritual and a physical battle. Let's put the spiritual aside for getting closer to Purim. But it's a physical battle. Amalek did not come just with their tachbulis. They came with a battle. And therefore, the takana was to protect us against everything, including the spiritual and physical.
We got
The big problem here is, excuse me, let me finish the thought. The Ketz Mishnah points out the fact that Gemara said the V'yisha b'neim, and the Rambam says Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says, where did this come from? So Ketz Mishnah, on the bottom right, just freeze it right where you are. You can read the bottom, the four bottom. Don't move it. Just nope. He said, don't move it. The last 4 lines. Kli Masha Amru, Amdu Neviim Sheb'neim Tiknu Kas Rabbeinu Moshe Rabbeinu Shalom Shahaya Hanavi Hagadol. He gives 3 reasons. He was the biggest Navi. So if it says Neviim, Shabineim, a good question why it has to be said plural. Why did it just say Navi? Why did it say Moshe Rabbeinu? V'chal Neviim shebadar beis dinai hu, said the Kesef Mishnah. V'oid, now you can go to the left. This Kesef Mishnah is very clear, because what do they have to give 3 reasons for? It's true, that's understandable, that Kesef Mishnah said Neviim means Moshe Rabbeinu, but he has to give you 3 reasons why. First of all, he was the biggest Navi. Second of all, he was the head of the Bezdin. And third of all, he only did things Baskamasai. Which dinim do we have here? So Baskamasai, they're all different. If you think about it, everybody say, and I thought about this last week, these are 3 separate halachic dinim to be conform to the 3 major job descriptions of Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom. What are those job descriptions? First of all, he was a Navi. Second of all, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Rosh HaBezdin. There was very clearly a Bezdin there. I mean, you have to listen to the Shver's advice. First time in history, somebody very important listened to the Shver right off the bat. And therefore, not only his Bezdin was created, which existed, but all sorts of sub-Bati Din were created, and he was the chief judge of everything. And what's the third job description of Melech that I said it, Moshe Rabbeinu had? Everybody say, anybody? No? It was a Melech. So what the Kesef Mishnah is telling you, you need all 3 dinim. You need them to be the Rosh of the Nevi'im. And what does it mean, Rosh of the Nevi'im? So the Gemara says there were other Nevi'im. We know from the Psukim that there was Nevuah floating around in the Midbar besides Moshe Rabbeinu. However, without going into an extended discussion of Eldad and Meidan, Misnab and Machneh, what's clear is the Rambam in the beginning of and the Rambam in 2 other places where he discusses Nevuah, describes Moshe Rabbeinu as Rabban Shel Kol Bnei Nevi'im, Shel Kol Nevi'im. It raises the question, what does that mean, Rabban? How could he be a Rebbe Nevuah? Can you teach someone to be Nevuah, a Navi? Is there such a thing? Kipshutai, Bernstein is Memana Nevi'im. Of course, they have to fit a complicated list of Nitunim to qualify for that. And then the Bernstein sends Nevuah into his psyche, however Nevuah works, for another description of Shiurim. Maybe one day we'll do Sugi of Nevuah. What's Pshat? Rabban Shel Kol Bnei Nevi'im. How could you teach Nevi'im? Why does Ram use this Lashon, Rabban Shel Kol Bnei Nevi'im? So the Mefarshim explain what the Rambam means is that Lulei Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah, which was different in kind as opposed to degree than all other Nevi'im, because Moshe Rabbeinu had peh and direct exposure to Rebbeinu Shalom, and other Nevi'im were b'mario b'chidais, as the pasuk says. However, Nevuah worked. Nevertheless, all subsequent Nevuah throughout history, whether it's Yeshaya or Yirmiyah, v'chulu, or Shoyev, were derived from Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah. Lulei the fact that the Kadosh Baruch Hu created the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, there would have been no subsequent Nevi'im. And that's what the Rambam means by Rabban Shel Kol Nevi'im. So when the Chazal tell us that Nevi'im Shebeneim Sheteknu, says the Kesef Mishnah, it must be Moshe Rabbeinu, because even if there were other the junior Nevi'im floating around, their Nevuah only came because of Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah. How that worked exactly, as I said, is a complicated subject in the Varnuchim and other places, which is not for now. Then, Me'idach Gisa, since this was a takana, it had to come within Rosh Bezdin. And these 2 things are not necessarily allied. It could be benigud. Why is that? Because the Allah is Terlai B'Shamayim. You cannot paskin halachos through Nevuah. You cannot pass Kallah Nevuah. There's a machlekes between 2 rabbanim in Lakewood today, and a baskel comes down, and there always is, and a baskel comes down and says, the halacha is like HaRav Yankel, Ein mashgichim b'baskel, Torah l'im b'shamayim he, and the person who's chaylik on him has full right to be chaylik. Let's make it more real. There are numerous machlekes into Rav Yashem and his mechut Rav Zalman and Ilchei Shabbos, so we've been learning last 2 years. And what's the halacha? You have to bring rayas to them. You have to write shuvas for them. You can't just listen to a baskel, because the Torah is lema shamayim. He cannot pass control of Nevuah. So a shaila of whether or not what the din of Kriyas Torah is and how it should be a megastelt and should be niskal with dairais had to come from Moshe Rabbeinu's chelik of Avbez, not the chelik of Nevuah. Even though, if you think about it, the entire Torah was a Nevuah. That was only once. Meaning, Kadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu once, al pi Nevuah. And it was chalin at the cheftza of, it moved from Nevuah into Torah. How that worked with the subsequent Nevi'im, there's a lot of brisket Torah in this, on how the subsequent Nevi'im, the Tanakh, the Nevi'im, Rishonim, and the Achreinim, how their Nevuahs became a chelik of the Kisvei HaKodesh, and at what point that happened. As I said, that's a subject for a Shir and Hilchos Nevuah and Kisvei HaKodesh. Not for now, but it's clear that the Torah that we had started up as a Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, and then became a din of Torah. Ibazah, we have a problem here, everybody said. How can this takana, Adkan Divrei Kesemish, then the Kesemish says, you know what, I found the Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi says clearly, Kasvai Rif, Moshe Tikkun Yisrael Shikar B'Torah, Shabbos Yom Torah, Chodesh Chalul Shamayim. We left out one category, two categories, everybody said. Two categories. Go back to the list, don't put the list back up again, but the Bala list should add, I forgot 9 and 10, I remember I had 10 or 11. Chodesh. Why am I saying it's a separate category? Because it is. Why am I saying it's a separate category? Because it is. So now we have two more big, important categories to add to our list. Says the Rabbeinu Menayach, down and shrink. Okay, scroll down and shrink, please. We're running out of time. On the bottom right, Shiach Shloshim B'lei Torah, Leimat Samayim brings the Gemara, Lashon the Gemara, Perik Meruba, Tik Nevi'im Shebeneim. Ube'emes says that the Rabbeinu Menayach, this the Kesem should not have this. Moshe Ikar Nevi'im Shayil Yisrael. Next page, next column. Over Yerushalmi, finish Moshe Ben Tikkun Davar K'Moshe Goss HaRav. And therefore, the Rabbeinu Menayach goes right to the Yerushalmi as the Makar. Is there a machlekes involving Yerushalmi here? Could be. Probably says Nevi'im. Yerushalmi says Moshe Rabbeinu. And what's the reason for the Bavli diverting from Moshe Rabbeinu? So this question is important, and it leads to a tremendous chiddush of the Teres Chaim. Background: there's a machlekes of Gemara in Gittin, which freeze the word is here. Let me letterize first, Pesach, please. Let me letterize first before we get the text up. You can leave the Rambam on. There's a machlekes in the Gemara in Gittin, how the Torah was constructed. Whether or not Torah Megillah Nitna, or Chasuma Nitna. Megillah Nitna means that it was, as the parsha was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, it was written down, and it was chal on it, shem chetz of Torah, to use the brisker terminology. But of course, by definition, it wasn't complete. Because Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu the tzivui of the Siyas Mishkan, or a Siyas Klei Hamikdash, or a Bigdei Kahuna, so even Imtim Salayim, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it down and transmitted it to Aaron, and the way all the Torah was transmitted, and then the Nadav Avihu, and there's a Canaan, and it became Torah, but it couldn't have been a Sefer Torah, as we know, because it certainly wasn't complete. There's another man that holds Torah Chasuma Nitna, that nothing was written down until the end, all the way at Aris Mayav. Asked the David, Akasha, according to the man, the Omar, the Torah Chasuma is Nitna. He's not the only kind of person that asks this Kasha. Many do, including, as we'll see, the Teres Chaim. They didn't have a Torah till the end of a Bar Mishana. How could there have been Kriyas HaTorah without a Torah? So this is what the Achronim struggle with. This could be the pshat in why Chazal said that it was Nevi'im should be named. It could be that these Nevi'im were subsequent to Moshe Rabbeinu, said the Teres Chaim, because we didn't have a Sefer Torah. So how could there have been a takana of a Sefer Torah, of Kriyas Torah, without a Sefer Torah? The Torah Tamima is Mayor this and Shmais Tezvav Islam and Dalit. The Iker Maramakan that we're going to share with you now is the Torah's Chaim, who says you can't read in a Sefer Torah that is Chasra Afilu like Eis Achas. And therefore, how can the Moshe Rabbeinu be metaken Shabbos and Beis V'Hei if there was no complete Sefer Torah? Says the Torah's Chaim, Asher al Kain, it must be that the Takana was subsequent to Moshe Rabbeinu, after the Moshe Rabbeinu's Tira. And that's why Chazal saying the V'yim B'neim, they are careful not to say Moshe Rabbeinu. This Chiddush is explicated by other Achronim. I've found the Sefer Goyer and David, and he brings her up Nissen Goyen. Rav Avadia discusses this in our Chaim Siman Yud Zayin. Legabe Shitas, what is the kashrus of Shitas Rambam of the Sefer Torah that is missing by Sacha? So I want to make clear by side that this Yarchei Kallah is dedicated to Hilchos Chaim Kriyas Torah, not Yeridea, which is mitzvahs ksiva Sefer Torah and the kashrus of the Sefer Torah. That's a different studia. But by definition, there's overlap. Because if you have a Sefer Torah psula, can you read and be Mekayim Kriyas Torah or not? So we're basically focusing on our Chaim, and we're going to have some, obviously, Nitunim, which are Yeridea Kerlet. So Torah's Chaim, followed up by Sefer Kover Yeshua, addressed the subject. Now we can see the Torah's Chaim inside. Those of you coming on to hear the Rav, it's now 12:02. He's going to come on at 12:10, as he usually does. So let's see the Torah's Chaim inside. So he brings the Taisus first. Yeshlayim Madam the Nevi'im Shebeneim the Kamar. Who are these Nevi'im? Hainu la'achar zman achar b'tiras Moshe roa kilkol shein kval yedei shloch b'matay Torah. They saw the aforementioned kilkol that we explained up in the Marsha and Rabbi Yonason Asu Takanazu, but it wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu. And he brings a raya, the Teda, trailing Nigmar Teresh after his Moshe. Teresh Chazar for less than Karambai. Ashalich Mashtikna Vim Shem like Tikain Moshe Atzmai Takanazu Adkan Divriya Teresh Chai. So my partner Rabbi Shapiro points out to those of you who are not regulars, even though there's a big island here, but we are more than happy to have participation of the entire island. So if you have anything you want to say, please open up. The mics are all opened up, and you can participate. Okay.
Can I just say one thing? There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people I see now coming on the phone line, not on Zoom. And first of all, if they want information about the Shiurim to get on our email list, they can email me at pslederiach, LEDEREICH, pslederich @gmail.com. And we need help with the SIUM. So we need people to sign up. People want to sponsor Shiurim, they could email me as well. And
okay. Pesach, excellent. Thank you. So again, I'm going to, since Pesach is modest and he can't speak about himself, I'm going to just tell you what I mentioned at the beginning of this year, that this entire operation that we do on a daily basis, and certainly this week, in preparation of the Kallah, could not work without him, because he's volunteered to take on all the work nobody else wants to do. And even his Rebbetzin, Isha Chashuva, Isha Chaver, is in charge of keeping track of all the DNA Mamada. So that score, we're making two appeals here to our Olam. Appeal number one is we're making two Siyum in Eretz Yisrael. These Siyum are designed both to be Mahanam and Neshamis of two giants, one that we had an absolute direct connection with, the second that we all had an indirect connection because of the Torah. One is a guy named Shiner, who was came to be a Machabdis Yarchei Kallah many times, and a guy named David Soloveitchik, who both gifter eerily enough on the same day, Chai Shvat. We originally had planned this because we were going to be there under the original scheduling of the Yarchei Kallah before we got Omicron, but we decided to go ahead with this, and we'll be Now, there'll be a Siyum on Tuesday night, which I can participate in with Zoom. With Nishmas, those two Rabbanim Againim with Chashav speakers. And on Wednesday night, the daily Zoom Kallah will also be hosting a Siyum. L'chvayid Am Yidei Shir, our Rabbanim, all the Rabbanim, many of them from Eretz Yisrael, who have come to be Mahanas. Two of them will be on the program, our Rabbanim Kallah and Elephant. So we need help in making sure that these Siyum exist. So we're a Pesach. I think Yidei Rav Nissen sent out the spreadsheet from Megillah, which is the main source. In addition to Baba Kama, we're not going to put Baba Kama on you. A Megillah, main source of the sugya, so we can finish all Megillah. Everybody take a blot too. Learn Daf Yomi Chazer. The same for Moed Katan. I think we've done a lot of progress in Moed Katan, even though there are still some gaps. So our Pesach is going to send it out. Second, in addition to the sponsoring opportunities that we offer every week for either Rabbi Weitzer or Rabbi Kallah Shir, we would like to be market type in a physical, tangible way. So we bought them each a small gift. And anybody who wants to participate in this, the suggested donation is $36, which is not a lot of money for a course type for these two giants who have been teaching us for the last 2 years, so we can give them something tangible. In Eretz Yisrael, Pesach is going to send out his emails in that score, and if you're new and your email list is not there, we don't do this often, so don't worry. And it's not a fundraising tool; it's just a tool to keep everybody involved. Our I'll use the term, our schnaring is beikar for your attendance, not for your money. And we'd love to keep this, our operation here expanded. Adkan, let's get back to this. Says the Koiva Yeshua. Who is the Koiva Yeshua? Any from the Chashav of the recent Dairais. He says a similar Vart. And then we'll come back to conclude here with an incredible Love the Shabbat from Rabbeinu Chasam Sefer. You can scroll Pesach to the Koiva Yeshua. So he says on the bottom, starts on the bottom right. Up to the view of a name, Kasser Teres Chaim. He references the Teres Chaim. Sefer Teres Shachasar Achas. How could it be? Then he brings it to Rishalmi. Isa Moshe Kohen. Go top. Sheikhaim Teres Shabbos. Rishalmi Rishalmi Shitas Azol. So he says very interesting. The shaila here is: can you read in the Sefer Teres Chasar Achas? And I said that's the Kallah. It says. The Rishalmi holds clearly the Medina mutter likrais barab b'tzei v'terech chasera. Anybody know who follows this psak in the Rishalmi? Anybody know? Famous.
The Mordechai, no?
Keep on going. I'll go back earlier. The Rambam. Sheets the Rambam. Follow the sheets of the guidance. And the Evan you can read even from the Sefer Terech Chaser. We don't pass that way. And therefore, there's a whole problem, which we will get to Usim and Sefer Torah. Rabbi Kallah is going to give a share in that. No, yet, but sent me a list of things that he possibly talk about that, which is halacha l'maisa. So listen to what he says. Why was there a takana but you can't read from the Sefer Torah Chaser? Says the Yerushalmi, because it was a Chazal's havana into the psychology of us. If we're going to allow a Sefer Torah puzzle, then people will not want to pay. Now, unfortunately, I guess the price of Sefer Torah has quadrupled. Mamish, quadrupled. A nice Chashav Sefer Torah now, I'm told, shockingly enough, is $200,000. I'm not going to go into the inflationary reasons behind that, but people are not going to write good Sefer Torahs. So therefore, they puzzle the Sefer Torah that's Chashav. Says the Yeshua, obviously, is now it explains why this problem was not a problem before. So Teres Chaim's problem was not a problem before there was a full Sefer Torah. He had this. You could read from the whatever Megillah they had. I don't know about Chasuma, but according to the Megillah, they could have read from whatever they had because there was no takana of puzzle, because there was no need to incentivize Klal Yisrael to buy Chashav Sefer Torah because there wasn't such a thing as a Sefer Torah yet. Adkan the Chapa the Koiv Yeshua, and he makes it Yerushalmi Lishitasa. Comes along Rabbeinu some Sefer and ties it all up in a beautiful way, and we'll conclude with this. Before we get to some Sefer, let's tell you another Moshe. That's Rabbeinu Ramban. Ramban of the Sefer Mitzvahs. Here we go. Ramban of the Sefer Mitzvahs and Sherish Beis, the famous machlekes he has with the Rambam on a Hachanah of Hallel, says, listen to the Lashon. We're going to have here just a line. Says, what does it mean? Nevi'im shebeneim tiknu. Why is that? Because the Gemara Pesachim of Vav, the Zayin, if I remember correctly, talks about the Hachanah of Hallel, uses the same parallel phraseology, Nevi'im shebeneim tiknu. So who are these Nevi'im shebeneim? Says the Ramban, Yirmais l'dar sheyatzer Mitzrayim, l'Moshe, Aaron, u'Miriam, va'atzilei b'nei Yisrael, u'l'chol shebehem ruach hakodesh. Wow. Ramban says clearly that there were other people not there, this we know from Eldad and Meidad, that had ruach hakodesh, and they were the atzilei b'nei Yisrael. The atzilei b'nei Yisrael like shalach, as Yada in the end of Parshas Mishpatim a few weeks ago. Vayechsu asolikim. What does Vayechsu asolikim mean? It means they had ruach hakodesh. So ruach hakodesh may be different than Nevuah, allied to Nevuah. They had ruach hakodesh, and therefore there were other people around, and maybe they were the ones who attacked Kriyas Torah, according to the Bavli and not the Yerushalmi. Okay, let's go to this. Some Sefer has this problem. Okay, I'm not going to talk about Sefer Torah now at the moment because we're behind schedule. So when I finish this, some Sefer before we put the Rav on. So Rav Mordechai, 3-minute warning. The question is, some Sefer has this is in the Tshuvas. He has a complicated Tshuva here, and he says the following: in history, the way it worked out is like this: we have Moshe Rabbeinu's Takana, whatever that was. That's clearly Torah Shabbat. Then Klal Yisrael went into Eretz Yisrael, Bayis Rishon, and then they went to Gol's Bavel. What happened in Gol's Bavel? What happened in Gol's Bavel, you think about it, it's very understandable. What happened in Gol's Bavel is, for those of you coming on looking for Rabbi Weiss, he will be on momentarily. Sorry, but we're running a little bit behind schedule because of the large amount of information that we had to impart here, including some scheduling stuff. So give me 3 minutes here just to tell you this cipher. Says the some Sefer in the Kufa of Gol's Bavel, terrible thing happened. Klal Yisrael lost their ability to understand Lashon HaKodesh. Lashon HaKodesh was something that was used for rarefied occasions in the Beis HaMikdash v'chulu. Once the Beis HaMikdash was churban, nechrav, and I told this to an Olam, I started preparing this with my Olam here on Shabbos too, and I said, look at history, 70 years, which is a couple of dairies, is more than enough to have a language extinguished. Many of our children don't speak Yiddish anymore, even though our parents did. So that's such a long time. So they forgot Lashon HaKodesh, said some Sefer. So what did Ezra decide to do? He created, and they reverted to Arabic, which was the lingua franca of the entire world at the time, the Mediterranean basin where everybody lived. That's what they spoke. So Ezra Sefer created the Matar game. I should have not put the thing on. Okay, leave it on here for the moment. I created the office of the Matar game to translate the Kriya, which he took Moshe Rabbeinu's Takana and he improved it, so to speak, or tinkered with it. But one of the things that he did was he created a Matar game that will be able to explain it to the Rabbim, and this is based on the Gemara Megillah Daf Gimel and the pasuk in Nehemiah. Says, what do we need to increase the Torah about? Just get up and teach the Torah. You know, what do you need a kriya for? Tell you the word outside. Says, there are 2 dinim of kriyas Torah. You have not yet sufficiently focused on this, which we will do. And again, everybody say the way it's working out here, I'm going to have to use both the mornings and the nights. I'll try to chazar whatever I can in the second set of the Shiurim, but at 8 o'clock tonight, we're going to focus on this question. What's the mechayiv of kriyas Torah? Is that takana shlayelchu gimel yoma b'kriyas Torah, shmiyas Torah, mashver the lashon around that you saw, Or is it, we're going to get back to the Chum Sefer Pesach, or is it a din in Limud HaTorah? Talmud Torah is Kallah. You're about to hear a shir from my wives on the subject of Talmud Torah. What's the Machayim? Says Chum Sefer two dinim. There's Kriyas HaTorah and there's Limud HaTorah. And therefore, the takanas that were created over the various kufais spoke to both of these mechayim. You needed a betargum because none of us are yaitze limud haTorah without understanding what we're talking about. You go in, I'm telling you right now, everybody say, I think it's pretty clear. You go in and you listen to a cheer in Chinese, which you do not understand, you're not yaitze chiyav of limud haTorah.